So hello, everybody. We do have a lot of people on the line. So just in terms of logistics, we just wanted to ask that you use the chat function of the GoToWebinar to ask questions. Please, we certainly welcome questions whenever you think of them throughout the presentation, but we're going to save those up and address them at the end. Hello, everyone. My name is Karen Patterson. I am a senior ERP strategy consultant with Revolution Group, and I'd like to welcome you all today as we discuss the ins and outs of Plex UX and what it might mean for your business. A little bit about Revolution Group. We are a technology services company founded in 1995. Revolution's mission is to forever change the way you think about technology. Originally an IBM mid-range shop, Revolution quickly grasped the vision of the early pioneers of software as a service and partnered with front runners such as Plex and Salesforce to the advantage of our client base. As such, we have grown to an organization with three practice areas: technology services, showcasing managed IT services, a vibrant Salesforce practice, and of course, our manufacturing services group, of which Marty and I have been a part for over 20 years. Our relationship with Plex began in 1999 as we were working to find a progressive ERP system for a large Tier 1 automotive manufacturer. We were dreaming of a system that would be intuitive, completely integrated, and could actually be implemented. Quite by surprise, we found all of these things in fledgling company Plexus Online and decided to take a huge leap into the unknown of a web-based application simply because of the functional benefits it provided. We have been huge believers and advocates for Plex systems ever since and have been with them the whole way, including building the first and best partner team to extend Plex functionality through development and closely walking the UX journey with Plex, all the while successfully implementing 127 plants in 9 countries. We are proud of the huge strides our client base has achieved when adopting the Plex tool and believe fully in the future of UX. With that, I'd like to introduce Marty Staats, my longtime peer and probably just about Plex user number 3, to help walk us through the UX journey. And lest you think that you are alone on this journey, we want to assure you that you have 157 peers representing 92 distinct companies along for the ride with us today.
Thank you, Karen. As we're preparing for today's webinar, we're talking about how navigating the UX transition is a lot like trying to navigate a maze. And we're trying to think of different analogies as to what we're running towards. You know, are we running towards the light? And it really came kind of equated to running towards cheese in a maze. And it was kind of funny as I was trying to look for good slides for this this transition. I really started looking up different things on the internet, and I kind of caution you on that because you come up with things like cheese rolling, and here you can see people either running towards the cheese or maybe running from the cheese. But if you want a good chuckle, there are definitely some great videos online that I strongly urge you to check out. It's not often that you get the words cheese and carnage in the same sentence. So, you know, talking to a lot of you out there, you know, a lot of people still consider UX the new thing. But, you know, as you start looking back at its history, it was first announced back in 2013. UX at that point was called F5. Really, it has come about in a long methodical maturity. And we got access to it in 2015, and we started working strongly with Plex in 2016 on testing it and trying to resolve issues, going through gap resolutions at that time to make sure functionality was behaving the way that we expected it to in a transition from a Classic to UX. And then in 2017, we began doing our own UX deployments, and we've been doing that ever since. In 2019, we began transitioning companies like your own to UX, and that has been a very learning process, but for both us as partners and also for the clients. And we've, based on those transitions, we've been improving our methodology to try to perfect that to minimize the headaches of that process. So we know there are a lot of obstacles in achieving a transition to UX. At this point in time, we do have a little survey that we're going to kick off. We just really kind of want to get feedback on what you feel as the primary obstacle is that you're facing when transitioning to UX. There's the prerequisite transition tasks. They're the functional deltas where the system may behave a little bit differently than what you're used to in Classic. There's the concern about security migration, time and resource constraints, and also the project management. So you should have the ability to chime in on what you feel to be your primary obstacle. Okay, so we will be collecting that data and we'll be getting back with you on that. I think it may become visible to you as the polling is closed. So let's talk a little bit about those transition tasks. Now, if you are a old Plex Classic customer, you're probably around the time that they had the materials list. So one of the prerequisites there is you need to transition to the parts. Also too, if you were unfortunate enough to not have the multi-level financials available to you at that time and you haven't transitioned, that's also a requirement. Also, moving to the setup BOM is going to be a requirement. Beyond that, there's a lot of configuration that needs to be done in preparation. Customer print documents is a wonderful tool that you're going to have available to you in UX that really controls when certain documents print and to which customers, which ship tos they're going to print for. But that is a little bit of a challenge to get configured and set up. And also too, if you want some specialty optional print options on those documents, that's going to require some additional setup as those documents are made available to you. Also, if you're using HTML labels, you're going to need to transition those to either a ZPL label or to a PDF. So that's going to take some preparation there. If you're using Classic Vision Plex screens, those are going to have to be converted. That's something you can do yourself if you have that skill set, or something Revolution Group can help you with. And they're also, Plex is supposed to be rolling out very soon a transition tool for that process. So hopefully that should aid you in that quest. As far as the mobile application, as far as setting up the traditional mobile menu, you're going to have to switch to the .NET menu editor if you haven't already done so. And that's going to require a little bit of forethought and a little bit of exposure to security. Of course, you're going to have to think about web browser, and if you want to make a change to your primary web browser, especially on the shop floor, check printout is a little bit different. It goes from pixels to points, and that's a little bit different of a setup. The mobile application is different, especially if you are a colo customer. So you're going to be using the new Plex mobile applications. And also to conversion of the problem forms, if you've probably been following Plex through the development of UX, you know, at the beginning, those forms that you authored yourself were not available in UX, and now there's a conversion process to get those made available to you. That's something you can do. There's also a lot of functional deltas. This is kind of a fluid list because Plex is making changes to this as we go. And if you're using the tools online, and I suggest that you do visit the community and take a look at Plex's transition guide. There are references here, but some of those references are old, a little bit dated. It is a very, like I said, a very fluid process at this point in time. So I really encourage you to look at the community and subscribe to threads, especially for the new roadmap and the new product releases, because some of these have changed versus the status they were when the guide was written. But of course, problem control, as I mentioned before, is a little bit different in the conversion of those custom authored forms. The ECR and sales quote management, because of the wizard nature, is a little bit different in behavior in UX than it was in Classic. Shipping documentations, of course, we talked about that. Auto shipper emails requires additional configuration. Interplant transfers behave a little bit differently. And of course, the control panel, that is going to be a big user change, just because the fact that a lot of the shop floor users, they're a little bit resistant to change, and they're a little bit harder to help navigate through changes. So that's going to be a big concern of yours, especially as you're going through the testing of the UX application. Pack container boxes, that gives you an extra flavor. You can do a pack containers or pack containers to boxes. Gives you a little bit different functionality there. And if you're using query strings on SPC menus or for DCS menus, those behave a little bit differently. You're going to be using favorites for that. Web services, if you're the move to the more current web service is going to be a requirement. If you're using those old PO and requisition approval process, that's really going to have to be managed through workflow now. So there's a lot of functional deltas that you're going to have to navigate in order to reach the desired outcomes that you want from the transition. Security is probably one of the biggest changes that you're going to have in migrating from Classic to UX. Because of the one subject matter, it is completely a paradigm shift as we're looking to at an activation for access type methodology. First of all, you know about the IAM requirement. And also too, you have the security role based requirement. So there's no longer assigning permissions directly to users. You're going to have to be moving through security roles. And those old permissions are being slowly retired. A lot of those have been retired at this point in time, and those are being replaced with actions, and at really a rate of 6 to 1. So there's about 6 times the amount of screen actions available for limitations and access than what you had permissions before under Classic. Of course, a little bit different in IP access controls. You have application IP access controls. Also too, if you're, say you're SOX compliant and you're concerned about separation of duties, Plex has the privilege conflicts setups now available to you to help you manage that activity so that you don't assign somebody access to things that are conflicts in separations of duties. There's also role-based menu navigations. So you don't have the old traditional set up your own menu structure for different groups, departments, or users, but you can do that through your security roles. So they have their own special navigation there. Also, you have a stronger mobile-based security with mobile screen actions. And you have the capability with enterprise roles to create and synchronize enterprise roles from one PCN. So very positive changes there, but also too, it's a very kind of tough waters to navigate if you don't have extensive research and practice in those areas. To assist in the UX transition, we do, being Revolution, offer a 8-hour workshop that we've got a lot of traction there. A lot of people are kind of concerned that they want to set up their security correctly because it is such a big task to set up all of those security roles that are going to be needed for your organization. They want to make sure that they're doing those with proper guidance so that they don't have to change course and unthink what they have in place at a later date. So that gives us a chance to work with you, understand what your security objectives are, and give you both instruction and also hands-on activities to help you with that task. Another major hurdle is time, resources, and project management. I think that's a very popular feedback when I'm talking to different champions at the different customer PCNs that have not transitioned yet, as to what is delaying their adoption of UX. It's just trying to get that project kicked off and have the proper resources in place for that, and freeing up those resources, freeing up their time to make those changes. Obviously, you have to have a very sound methodology. Plex does have the transition guide to help you with that. Also, too, we have our own methodology that is relatively closely aligned to what Plex does. It really helps to have subject matter experts in the areas. So when you're talking about subject matter knowledge, I'm talking about UX subject matter knowledge and also UX experience, along with the technical skills to navigate UX. So that's very challenging right at the beginning. So you're going to have to spend some time perusing the community and working on training videos to acquire that skill set. Also, communications. It's very important that you communicate to the organization about what the change is, what your objectives are there, and also to manage their expectations on what they're going to be seeing from the navigation or the transition to UX. Change management, Karen mentioned it briefly, but it is a major pain point out there. Obviously, people don't like change, especially when they have become quite efficient in the way they do their job and utilizing the tools that have been made available for them. And this, again, this is a requirement for them to maybe they're going to have to change and navigate a new system and utilize new screens, new actions to do what they used to do. Obviously, that'll be bringing some positives with it, but also with that, though, you have people that are very set in their ways, so you're going to have to help them navigate that change. And project management tools, what are you going to use to manage that project? How are you going to manage the tasks that need to be done, and setting the timelines for that and making those visible to the rest of the people in the organization. Revolution Group, as I mentioned before, we do have our own methodology for that. Again, it is relatively closely aligned to Plex's methodology, where we go through the project planning phase. We identify who the project team is going to be for the organization at possibly an enterprise level. And then we start working on those prerequisite tasks that we have to have in place. We help guide you through where we have deltas, and to decide which direction we're going to take with those deltas, and how maybe we may have to reconfigure some processes for you. So that's part of that guided discovery, to make you aware of what's available to you and help you make the right decision for transition. Also, too, in the planning phase, we're going through and deciding who are your functional subject matter experts, what are their responsibilities in the project, and how are they going to interact with you as we go through the setup and validation phase. Setup validation is we're helping you navigate your functions using the Plex UX screens so that you're comfortable using those screens helping you maybe reconfigure those as necessary because there are new options available to you, new UX settings. And also, at the same time, if there's possibilities for some optimization activities, we may be able to include that as part of your UX rollout. And again, manage those changes and help you communicate that and incorporate that to the rest of the organization. And then after that, we go right into the deploy process. A lot of our customers do phase in deployments, so they're not biting off the full deployment all at one time. It doesn't have to be a big bang with the UX rollout. We can do it in functional areas at a time, or you can get as granular as doing it work center by work center for the control panel. So we will help guide you through those activities. Just to give you a feel for where we spend most of our time, most of the time we would be spending in UX setup and validation. About 54% of our project is in that area because we really get down into the nitty-gritty to make sure that your local subject matter experts are very comfortable in what they're seeing and what they're doing in UX. This gives you an example of a timeline for UX transition. Of course, we work with our customers to properly align this with maybe other conflicts that they may have, other competing deadlines, and to make sure that we roll out a plan that's very doable for them, and we maintain proper progress towards meeting their end objectives and deadlines. We do use project controls. We utilize a Smartsheet product to manage all the different points of the transition. We actually have a 360-point validation process to make sure that we have all of the items covered in the transition so that we're not missing anything heading into deployment. We get a lot of questions from our customers about their project team, what they need to have in place. And of course, we expect a executive sponsor that helps the project stay online, stay focused, and that communicates the support to the rest of the organization. We have a project champion or champions, especially when we start getting into the validation phase. We're looking at probably an allocation of about 3 hours per week for those people. A lot of times we see an application administrator, somebody that helps them, especially when we start getting into those technical areas, and also when we start getting into hardware and other shop floor components. The functional subject matter experts, we actually see a lot of times about a 20-hour per week requirement of their time during the time of validation and also deployment, which is it's a very compressed timeline, so that won't be a very long-term requirement, but it is very intensive during that time period. And also too, as we start talking about some migration of data, sometimes we have a technical support person in place for that activity. So a lot of you, obviously, I'm guessing from the fact that you have joined us here today, you have not moved to UX. So really kind of the question is, what is the cheese for you? What is going to encourage you or get you to that place? So is that a enhanced user experience? Is that what's going to motivate you, or the improved security, new modules or functionality, which we'll be getting to here soon, new future development, or new products that are being rolled out? Or do you just need a lead mouse, somebody internally or externally to help guide you through the process? I think at this time, you're going to be seeing the option to have a polling question there, just to kind of ask you, what are you waiting for? What is the cheese that you're needing? What's it going to take to move you to UX? Talking about enhanced user experience, of course, it's a next generation platform. So it does prepare both for the traditional usage and also mobile usage of the system. Has a more intuitive user interface. You've got the drag and drop document management. It is a unified menu system, so you do have a standard navigation through the system. So I know a lot of you who are enterprise users may have PTNs and Classic that look completely different from one another. It makes navigation difficult for you, and also too makes the locking down of certain menu nodes and restricting access very difficult. With Plex, you do have that unified menu system, so it's the same navigation for all users, but you do have the option of doing a role-based navigation, role-based menus as you need those. You have persistent search capabilities, so you can at all times just enter in what you're looking for in the upper right of the screen. It gives you familiar navigation. As far as what users are used to today in browsing is the capability of going forward, backward, going to historic searches, looking at where you've been, and you have that opportunity in UX. You can look to navigate by your past session history and move right toward the screen where you just came from minutes ago. Simplified help. Plex is putting a lot of time into Knowledge Center. Is a replacement of the wiki. It's more uniform in the way it looks, and it provides you with guidance on click by click how to do certain activities, and also the prerequisite setup for those. So really a big fan of what they're doing there. Then there's VisionPlex improvements, and of course you've got the VisionPlex wizard that they've rolled out there to help you design VisionPlex screens, and also they position themselves well for continuous improvement, continuous innovation, and you're seeing that with a lot of the new products that they're releasing to you. Improved security, we've talked through a lot of that, so that is a big improvement, and an area that really is, if you're thinking about compliance requirements, that is an area that you're probably going to be very concerned with, and the additional security that they have in place now with UX is going to help you meet those objectives and compliance requirements. New functionality. So this is a biggie. Plex right now is pumping all of their new development primarily into UX. There's things that are big wins for a lot of the customers out there. Things like part substitutions. So basically you have pre-approved bill of material substitutions you set up in advance, so that allows the operators to make approved substitutions on the fly on the shop floor without somebody having to change the job bill of material for that. If you are a Toyota supplier and you're looking for that API integration with their SCS, their shipping confirmation system, that is going to be a big benefit towards you. Or maybe it's new just in sequence shipping requirements. So you have customers that require sequence shipping, and different OEMs have different requirements there, and they have a new JIS available to you, and later they're going to be rolling out third-party APIs for that integration if you want to use a third party to do that for you. If you're somebody who's using multiple jobs, or also known as dynamic multi-outs, you have the capability of now from the engineering side is grouping those so that they can be planned and scheduled, and at the dispatch list they can be selected as per required. There's lot management, lot attributes, maybe serial numbers is fine for you, but you also need to manage at a lot level. So you have to have lots, sell by lots, use by lots. That is going to be a big benefit to you using Plex's new lot management, and also inherited lots and lot attributes. So that's something you probably strongly want to take a look at. Scheduled document delivery is something that they're just rolling out, and that is going to be huge. I mean, that's been kind of a nuisance for a lot of people, as they have to go through the manual process of generating those documents, emailing those to their people in their supply chain, their customer or supplier. This gives you control now that you can schedule those activities and you can automate those activities. There's bill and hold features. If you need to bill your customer at the time you produce and not at the time of shipment. That gives you that capability. There's continuing enhancements and finite scheduling that's going to be looking for other constraints out there. At this point, we're talking about, we've already looked into part attributes, but also if you want to be looking at PMs and scheduled maintenance and their impact on the work center calendars. Of course, FMEA compliance, they had to have improvements there to meet compliance requirements, and also other points of integration with third-party systems. One area that is going to be huge is Smart EDI, and this is a future roadmap release for this year. They're just announcing that now. That gives you much more controls on the mappings of outbound documents. Yeah. As a matter of fact, if you are one of our customers that are going to be joining us for our PSCC conference coming up in February, we're going to have Plex is going to be speaking to us on Smart EDI, and that gives you a chance to get more into the details of that new functionality. Of course, VP migration tools we talked about, the component host extensions, so that you can properly print and you can do your scale integrations. And we're going to be discontinuing the WebSocket plugins that you know from Classic. So I really encourage you to take close looks in the community at their roadmaps and their product release schedules and get into the details of those, because I'm guessing that you're going to see a lot of things out there that's going to provide value to you now or in the future, and you definitely want to position yourself to take advantage of those. So what's this mean as far as Revolution Group goes and our position on UX? We have spent a lot of time in the UX, both doing deployments, doing transition projects, and just working with Plex on testing. We definitely think it's reached a maturity that we strongly think that you should have a plan in place, or should be putting a plan in place to adopt it. There are new things that are coming out, new product rollouts that we think should be very attractive to you and should complement your internal business planning. So we think that you should be paying attention to those and position yourself to be able to utilize those tools once they become available to you. We think that there's a lot of information out there. So whether you're going to be doing it yourself or you're going to be looking for external support and helping you in your project management and your transition and deployment, we encourage you to spend time in the community and look at that information, or contacting somebody to support you. Of course, Revolution, we have a lot of experience in this area, so we're always there to support you too if you need us. So what's next for you? Of course, you have to decide your approach. You know, are you going to be do it yourself, or are you going to look at somebody to help augment your understanding of certain subject matter? Are you going to contact somebody to more or less manage your transition project for you, help guide you step by step to the way? So you really have to understand how you're going to take it on. And I'm guessing by researching what you see online in the community, that's going to help you make that decision on what the best tools are for you. Of course, if you need guidance in that, or you have some questions for us, please contact us. As far as the transition plan itself, of course, you're going to have to establish your deadlines and milestones, who's going to be on your team, their roles and responsibility, what budget is in place, and whether that's going to be paying somebody as far as some external guidance there, or maybe a workshop, or just freeing up somebody in your organization by maybe adding some more resources to your team in order to free people up to work on this transition project. The management tools, what are you going to use to manage the process? Of course, a lot of steps are out there, but try to get your arms around it and try to put together logically so you know what the step-by-step is the requirements and what has to be done in relation to other steps. And also to just all those prerequisite tasks, deltas, the testing of those you're gonna have to make sure that you address each one of those on a very granular level. One thing too, you might want to consider, we see this a lot with our Classic customers, is that there is opportunities for optimization. A lot of times when people deployed in Classic, they have maybe limited functionality. Maybe Plex has developed something more over time, but they're not utilizing that. They don't know it's available to them, or they just haven't had the time to put that in place. So as we're thinking about rolling out new screens, new navigations, new functionality to our end users, there's an opportunity to optimize there, maybe help the user become more efficient in what they're doing, or maybe helping the system match their process a little bit better. And also too, how does that optimization fit with your desired timelines? Because of course, some optimization can be a major lift and some can be relatively easy. So you have to understand, okay, if I'm trying to put this in place, what will be the impact on the overall transition project? At this point, I'm going to turn back over to Karen.
Thank you very much, Marty. So there's been so much hype over UX for so many years, and you guys have probably all heard stories from folks when you're at PowerPlex, maybe a little bit of research that you've done. You've seen some successes, you've seen some challenges, and this is kind of a daunting task to make this change. So we wanted to put it in perspective a little bit, just by comparing what's the lift really, what are we really talking about here. So your initial implementation is represented by the maze on the left. That was the whole enchilada, whether you were moving from nothing to something, or you were moving from something very significant to Plex. You all know or have heard the stories of the challenges that were brought on by that initial implementation. In the middle, that maze is really there to represent a UX conversion. I mean, it is a maze. There are challenges to it. There are a lot of decisions to be made. There's a lot of exploring and things that need to be worked out, but it really is not as big as the initial implementation by any stretch. You know, we would probably say in terms of technical challenges, that's going to be really the biggest piece, technical, and then also managing those change expectations. Why do I need to change to this screen? Why do I need to make these changes? Remember that the back end is all the same application, and it's surprising when you do get used to it, you realize that it's the very same Plex that you're used to using. Some pieces have some differences, but you still have the same expectation. You still understand what's going to come next. You're just maybe clicking a little different place on the screen to make that happen. So that's really what the lift that we're talking about. And then of course, the reward of catching the cheese there at the end when you get through it. So regardless of where you are in your journey, Revolution Group stands ready to help. We've walked this path many times before, and we are very used to helping the team shoulder the load. Whether you have some questions for us or would like to get a jump start on security with a security workshop, or would like to ask us to throw on a pack and join the team, we would love to help you reach this pinnacle in 2021. We want to thank you all very much for your time today. This is a topic that we are obviously very strangely passionate about, and we appreciate the opportunity to share it with you all. I would like to introduce Molly Haynes, who has been with us here for a while. She is our ERP strategy coordinator, and she's going to help with further questions and bring us to our Q&A.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for attending our webinar today. A lot of you I have met at PowerPlex. A lot of you I have met via either email or phone. So, and those of you that I have not met yet, again, thank you for coming today. I did want to mention that I will be sending a follow-up email to everybody that will have my contact information on it, as well as a link to the presentation that you can refer back to. So if anybody is interested in furthering the conversation, please reach out to me and I can follow up with you guys personally and we can help you guys out. So again, thank you so much for coming today. So we have a little motto here, spring forward with UX 2021, and we hope the weather will be nicer in the spring. We are offering a 15% off your project cost. So this would be for UX transition projects, and these will be projects that are under contract by March 20th of 2021. So for those of you that are interested in getting started on this, this could be a great incentive for you guys. So now it's time for questions. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at some of these questions that we have. We actually have some really good questions here. So the first question is, how many transitions can Revolution Group handle at one time?
That's a good question. Obviously, that's kind of dependent on our resources and our engagements at the time. But we can, especially if you're an enterprise organization, we have been able to do things concurrently, so you don't have to really think about PCN by PCN rollout. We can combine some of those activities and speed that up for you. So really, it kind of depends on your objectives, your timelines. So we just need to really have a further discussion on that point.
Another question is, how long does an implementation take on average?
So as far as the front end of things, we're typically looking about 10 weeks to get you to the point of deployment, but the deployment really is kind of based on your calendar. Now, as we're going through the front end tasks and we're going through the setup and validation piece of it, we're cluing your subject matter experts in on the use and navigation of the screen to make sure they're comfortable with that. So some of those areas, they can take that and go and roll it out to their functional users, so that really we don't have to slow up the process and waiting for them to deploy, and they don't have to wait on us to complete everything. So they can start working on that. But then when we start getting into the deployment phase of things, it's really kind of your time frame. Some people have the capability of rolling things out relatively quickly. Maybe they have a small shop floor, or they can meet with their users en masse to get that done. Some want a more granular approach, that they go work center by work center, work with the users one at a time, make sure that they're fully versed in it before they go to the next. So it's kind of the deployment side is more on you. The preparation for that deployment, roughly, we're looking somewhere in the 10, 12 week time frame.
Okay. Another question, seems overwhelming. How do we even get started in knowing how or where to start with conversion? We don't have a dedicated Plex person to lead this.
So that is difficult, because obviously it does take that resource in place. You have to have a defined project manager with your organization. So you have to really think, if you're going to do it yourself, and there is guidance out there in the community, but it is a task putting that all together. Just for myself to keep up with the current information, where Plex is at and making new changes, it's a full-time job out there. So for somebody internally to do that, it's really going to be hard for them to maintain their typical requirements of their day-to-day responsibilities and have enough time to do this activity. So you're probably going to have to think about dedicating a resource, or maybe looking at somebody like maybe Revolution Group to help you in that activity.
I will join in there as well. I think in addition, that it depends somewhat on how complex your implementation is. I mean, if your implementation is a pretty straight down the middle use of Plex in a traditional manufacturing environment, that could be a smaller lift than some folks that have a lot of customized VP screens that are some of the more complex Plex processes that really have a lot of security issues that they have to deal with. So it can be a wide range. And if you are a small company that that is using Plex pretty much right down the middle of the road, it could be a much more manageable project.
Mm-hmm.
Another question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Marty.
No, that's good. Good points there, Karen. There is documentation out there too, VP screens available to help you assess where you're at in your UX readiness. I encourage you to take a look in community about that. I'll tell you about the use of those to help you analyze how much of a lift it's going to be for you.
Another question, is it best to transition to UX module by module or all at once?
Well, I think that's one of the beauties of this. As Karen mentioned, it's the same data. It's just the interface. So, I'm sure a lot of you were taxed with doing a big bang go live when you first deployed with Plex. With this, it can be a phased in approach. You can take functional area by functional area. You can take user by user. There is some concern though with that is there's some dual access concerns. Say, for example, if you're in the area of shipping, you say you have some users working in Classic and some users using UX. Your shipping documents coming out of UX are going to be completely different, or could be completely different than what you've got coming out of Classic. So you may want to think about rolling out complete functions at a time, but function by function is no problem at all. I think that's one of the beauties of this. You can start down the path and you can really kind of take it at how your objectives or your obstacles as they challenge you, you can adjust your timelines.
And here's a couple questions I think that might piggyback off that. One is it okay that some users in the same department use UX and others use Classic?
Yeah, again, what you have to look at is those dual access issues or considerations. There is some documentation on that in Plex, but really there are some areas we talked about, areas that use wizards like ECR or sales quote management. The performance is different. So you really have to take a look at those areas and do your due diligence before you make those determinations. It is nice though, once you migrate somebody from Classic to UX, you can cut their access back off from Classic, so you can force them onto UX from that point forward, and you don't have to worry about people backsliding and getting themselves into trouble by working in two different interfaces.
What areas should be transitioned first and which areas should go last?
Well, there is a little bit of debate amongst some champions on this, but overwhelmingly you want to move the ones that are going to adopt it fastest. You want to move those first. A lot of times those are the office, front office functions, your accounting, your finance folks. Those are the people that you spend all day in their system, and that's probably the ones that are going to adapt to it the easiest. And then typically you want to put your shop floor activities off to last, because those are typically your problem children. I hate to say that, but those are people that resist change. So you can make sure that you can focus all of your attention on those people, at that time.
Okay, and one side note here, we do have several questions in here, so if we don't get to all of them, we'll definitely get back to you and answer your questions. Another question is, do we have access to both Classic and UX concurrently for a period of time?
Yes, you make that decision. You can shut down the access to Classic for the PCN working with Plex, but from a user access capabilities, you decide when you're going to remove them from Classic access. So there are some areas, when we're talking about deltas, that people have moved for the most part all to UX, except for some of those delta areas, and are waiting for some changes in those before they complete their transition.
What if something I have is in Classic and it will not be moved to UX? How do I approach this?
That's a good question. That's something obviously you're going to have to work with your Plex success manager or AE for that. You know, obviously there are things out there that if there's enough need out of it, it might grab the attention of Plex from a suggestion standpoint. But I mean, that's something you're going to have to work with them on that.
Well, and I will add to that. You know, it depends on what it is. But Revolution Group, we write and extend Plex all day, every day, and so we write regularly in UX and have great capabilities to build a lot of tools. So we could absolutely talk with you about that, see what it is, and see what would be required to rebuild or rethink that process in some way.
Excellent point, Karen.
Another question, when there are multiple PCNs, are there impact points on PCNs not ready to transition?
No, you can do PCN by PCN.
Even if they have enterprise level functionality? I would think so.
That's some of the we're going to have to get into some of the enterprise, maybe financial considerations there. But for the most part, some of your basic daily activity functional area, the core stuff, it's typically not an issue.
Yeah, I mean, remember that the database is the same. And so any data that's coming to a UX screen is the same data that's going to come to a classic screen. So generally speaking, no issues.
Let's see here. Another question, what does a transition cost? Can you give me a range of what the cost would be?
Oh, you know, from our side of things, it's really, we would have to work with you more to discuss what your objectives are, timelines, and what they're, you know, maybe some of the functionality you're using. Ballpark, I mean, I think you're going to be somewhere between the 150 to 200 hour range, but that's just a figure off the top of my head. I mean, obviously, it's your capabilities and what you can do yourself versus what you would have us do for you.
And that would be generally at a plant level.
Correct.
Let's see here. Where is the best place to access what you call functional deltas? Is there a list of functionalities that were in Classic but will no longer be in UX? We will work from the slide in your presentation, but wondering if there are similar additional resources available.
There is information in the community, definitely. I encourage you to take a look at that. There's issues management spreadsheet that Plex maintains there for those issues. I don't know when the last update of those have been, so you may want to take a look at that, the timing of those, but there's a lot of chatter out in the community on a lot of those issues also. So there's been great strides if you go back and look really at the beginning in some of the first issue management spreadsheets versus the later ones. There have been significant amount of traction made in those areas.
Marty, could we, with a follow-up email, would it make sense for us to send a couple links to the community, to places that I would have thought we would have put it here at the end of the slide, but we'll follow up email with some links to some of our favorite community places.
Absolutely.
One more question. How hard will it be to move all of our financials to UX?
The only thing I can think of there is if they're not set up for multi-level financials. That would be a discussion there on the setup time involved in that. But other than that, really, there's really not that much of a concern beyond that. Karen, do you want to weigh in on that?
Sure. So mean, you don't have to change anything about your account structure. We're still using the same database. Really, it's a matter of, I believe that we could extend the account numbers in this transition. We don't have to. And then it's a matter really of using a different tool set to build your financial statements. So there were the classic financial statements that Plex kind of like a QuickBooks sort of a thing. And now using the multi-level financials, you can build them yourselves. So it isn't massive. And I mean, massive is a really much bigger than it should be.
Another question, how realistic is it for you to do it all yourself?
Well, for the company, it is possible. It is possible. I mean, obviously, as we have developed our methodology around it, the information was placed in doing our own research and doing that, it is possible. It is a challenge. I mean, it takes a considerable amount of time to research and get into the nitty-gritty granular details of this. So it is a lift, but you know, maybe it's something that you feel like you can handle certain aspects about it, but maybe the security piece is throwing you for a loop. Maybe something like a workshop with us could get you over that hurdle, and maybe the rest you can manage yourself. So, you know, I'd encourage you, you know, we can have a specific discussion about your organization, you know, just schedule time with us and we can talk about the specifics.
Here's another question about PCNs. When there are multiple PCNs, are there impact points on PCNs that are not ready to transition?
I think that's pretty much what we had before. I think that's the same comment. Yeah.
Okay, let me see. Another question. How long can we have dual system?
Well, again, that dual access is really, it's based on your time frame. You do have capabilities of cutting it off by user or by PCN at your, when you make that decision.
Does Plex have any limitations around that?
The use of Classic?
The use of dual.
No, not at this point. They want you to make traction, obviously, but if there's a good reason why you can't move, you know, or if there's something that's taking you a little bit longer in a certain functional area, you know, this is something that they'll definitely consider.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. And again, you know, you can talk to me directly and we can get some answers to questions that we didn't get to. Will there be a show and tell seminar that will show us what the interface will look like?
That's a good question. For those of you who part of our supply chain conference, that's something we can definitely work with you on. You know, if you can kind of share with us what you're looking for. We've done that from time to time and we'll definitely do that again, but also something we can follow up with additional webinars too and give you some ideas there on what you're going to be looking at. I know that Plex has some screenshots out there, and I think they probably have some videos out there too for you to look at, but that's something we can definitely look for you to do for you.
I'm sure there's guidance out there also getting access to your PCN in UX.
Correct.
I mean,
Correct. It's a regimented thing. Obviously, Plex you have to start by your initial contact with Plex, say that we're interested in taking on the transition project, and then they're going to make you go through some training, initial training, so you understand the UX and the key change points of UX, and then they'll set you up with the UX access. They'll appoint you as a security auditor. You can set up a primary role from there and introduce your project team at that point.
Okay. Well, it's 3 o'clock, so I don't know if you guys have any closing thoughts.
No, I'm really jazzed that the number of people who have attended today, you know, was our concern. We've had quite a bit of discussions internally. We know what kind of a lift it is, and we don't want people to drag it out, especially when there's great functionality out there available to them. And we want them to get the bang for their buck. You know, you're subscribing to Plex, you should get all the features that you're entitled to. So we really hope that you use 2021 as the year to start making the move towards your cheese.
And watch the show about cheese rolling on Netflix. It's very funny. Thank you all very, very much. We appreciate spending time with you this afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.